So, welcome to the SPSS Masterclass Module 2, Day 1. Today we'll be discussing about the hypotheses, how to formulate the hypotheses and how to test those hypotheses. So, the concept of hypothesis that comes from basically from the normal distribution. So, in the previous session, I have talked about this normal distribution, the bell-shaped curve, where you have a fair representation of the population. So like I have taken the height of each person in my population, and if it is normally distributed, then it will show that very less people have more heights or larger heights, very less people have smaller heights. However, maximum number of people will be having average heights. That's what a normal distribution tells us. So if you see this normal distribution divided by is divided into basically three categories ranging from mu minus 3 sigma to mu plus 3 sigma, means where mu is the mean of the population. So mean minus 3 sigma is one zone, then mean minus 2 sigma or mu minus 2 sigma is second zone, mu minus sigma is the third zone, and then you have the central point, or that is the mu, and then again in the positive direction mu plus sigma, mu plus 2 sigma, and mu plus 3 sigma. So normally if I talk of normal distribution, it ranges from uh, just a minute, it ranges from this zone to this zone, mu minus 2 sigma to mu plus 2 sigma. Then and this area is known as the confidence interval, and this area is known as the error zone or error estimate, or you can say the significance level, whatever you can say. So normally we say if P is less than 0.05, so if P is less than alpha, P is less than alpha, that is alpha is 0.05, reject null hypothesis. So normally we say, now this 0.5 or 0.5 is nothing but the error estimate, or you can say if you are keeping the confidence interval as if you as 95%, then your error estimate will be 5%. So if anything, now what is this P is? P is the probability of the occurrence by chance. So if anything occurs by chance, you will say that it will fall into the 5% error zone. So the moment you are saying this P is less than 0.5 or P is less than 5%, means it is not falling in the error zone, it is not happening by chance, it will fall into your confidence interval level. And that's where you will reject the null hypothesis. Like I'm saying that, and I'll take the example that how we do the errors. While we do this hypothesis test, we also do some errors known as type 1 and type 2 error. Let's assume a null hypothesis. Men cannot become pregnant. And its alternate hypothesis could be men could become pregnant. So if I test this hypothesis, and if my p-value is less than 0.5, it means that whatever the hypothesis I am testing in my population and whatever the result I am getting, that is not happening by chance. So null hypothesis will be rejected. However, here I am making error. I'll come to that. If p is greater than alpha, means it is falling in the zone of 5% or more. That is whatever I am testing in my population, that is happening by chance, and I can say it's a error estimate that I am doing, and in that case it will fall into 5% and I will accept the null hypothesis. Now this is the basis of accepting and rejecting the null hypothesis. But what exactly a null hypothesis is? So most of us think that a null hypothesis is a negative statement. So null hypothesis is not always a negative statement. Null hypothesis is a negation of existing theory. Let's say if some results, some tests have been done, some survey or some research has been done in a population, and it shows some result. I am doing the same kind of research in my sample or in my population. So let's say if I'm agreeing to whatever the prior studies are saying, there is no point in testing. So I shouldn't agree with that. First, to remove the biasness, that's why we never formulate an alternate hypothesis first. We formulate a null hypothesis where we say that I do not agree with the existing theories. Let's say if existing studies say that there is no significant effect of class attendance on student performance in exam. So if I have to keep my statement negative, like people say that null hypothesis is always negative statement, then again my hypothesis statement would be, if I want to keep it negative, that class attendance has no effect on students' scores or students' performance. But if I am putting like this way, I am agreeing to the previous study. If I am agreeing to the previous studies, then there is no point in testing my hypothesis. This is not an hypothesis. I am just agreeing what others people have already concluded. So there is no point in testing. My null hypothesis is wrong. My null hypothesis could be that there exists a effect of extra class attendance on students' performance. I am just negating that prior studies because I want to check whether in my population this is going to be true or not. So first I will negate that and test that whether my assumption is correct or what people have previously said that is correct. Am I clear on this? Yes, audience, please. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So null hypothesis is basically it's you can say it's a negation, not a negative statement. And it comes from the normal distribution. So, while rejecting a null hypothesis, we do some kind of errors. We may end up in error. Let's say, and these errors are type 1 and type 2 error. So, type 1 error is when we reject a null hypothesis that stands true in the population. Like in our case, the null hypothesis was men cannot become pregnant. But if I reject this null hypothesis, I am doing type 1 error because this is a fact from many other studies, or and this is a universal phenomenon. Man cannot become pregnant, but I am saying that if I reject it, it will say that man can become pregnant. Now, this is the case where I am doing type 1 error. Or you can take a simple example in the COVID case. Let's say a person who is not having COVID is tested positive for COVID. So null hypothesis was before he was, because if I am assuming that he might be having COVID, then why I'm testing? So first I'll assume that he might not be having COVID. This is my null hypothesis. And the fact is that he is not having COVID, but he has been tested for COVID. I have rejected the null hypothesis. That he is not having COVID, that have been rejected by error. This is type 1 error. Similarly, we have type 2 error where we fail to reject a null hypothesis that stands false in the population. Okay. So we are failing to reject a null hypothesis means we are accepting an alternate hypothesis in the situation when the concept stands false in the population. So I'll just tell you, for that we make, whether we are doing a type 1 error or type 2 error, we make a confusion matrix. So the confusion matrix is like this. You can see here. This pointer is not calibrated properly. So this matrix, you can see that it is having this one is having you can see positive and negative values, which are the actual values. Then on the other side, it is a 2 by 2 matrix actually, where you have predicted values. So something which you have predicted correctly and it's true also, it is known as true positive. So something which you have predicted but it is not actual, then it is false positive, and this is known as type 1 error. Type 1 error or false positive means you have predicted something but that is not true in the population. Then you were unable to predict something that stands true in the population. You have done false negative. Type 2 error. Type 2 error. And you have predicted something correctly. You have predicted, but that stands false in the population. That is known as true negative. So this false positive and false negative are actually the thing of concern. When we do a hypothesis test, we should be careful that we do not land up in doing any false positive or false negative. Where false positive is type 1 error, so rejecting a null hypothesis that stands true in the population, and false negative is type 2 error, means rejecting a null hypothesis, failing to reject a null hypothesis. We never say we have accepted an alternate. We say failing to reject a null hypothesis that stands false in the population. So like this, take this case. So a woman is pregnant and you predicted also that she is pregnant, true positive case. It's correct. Now you have predicted a male to be pregnant and male cannot be pregnant. That is the truth in the population. But you have rejected the null hypothesis and told that the male is pregnant. This is the type 1 error you are doing. Means the concept that does not stand true in the concept that stands true in the population, you rejected that itself. Okay. Then false negative, that is type 2 error, is the woman is pregnant but you are failing to detect that she is pregnant, means failing to reject a null hypothesis. So here your null hypothesis was female cannot be pregnant and you are failing to reject, the female here your null hypothesis is that female could not be pregnant and you are failing to reject this. You are saying yes, female cannot be pregnant. You are doing type 2 error. Normally, type 1 error is not a problem of concern, right? But type 2 error is a problem of concern. You should avoid doing type 2 error. If type 1 error is happening by chance, it's okay. But type 2 error shouldn't be there. So let me take an example of this COVID case only. So if it is type 1 error, what will happen? That a person who is not who is not having the symptoms of COVID, he is tested wrongly for COVID, that he is having COVID. This is type 1 error. So what will happen? You will start the medication. After that, few days, it will be that people will understand that okay, he is not having COVID, no issues. But what will be the case if a person is having COVID and you are unable to detect? Or similarly, take the case of diabetes. Person not having diabetes is tested positive for diabetes. That could be type 1 error, but won't have a much effect because actually he's not having the diabetes. But what the case if a person is having diabetes and is not detected that he's having diabetes? His medication won't start and that could be life threatening. So always avoid type 2 error. And avoiding type 2 error is no, or minimizing type 2 error is known as sensitivity. Sensitivity, or also known as power of a test, and is equal to 1 minus beta. So here let me tell you, this type 1 error is denoted by alpha and type 2 error is denoted by beta. So this is denoted by alpha and this is denoted by beta. So minimizing type 2 error is known as the power of a test, also known as sensitivity, and is equal to 1 minus beta. So if you see here, if you are minimizing this beta, this value will increase and hence the power of a test will also increase. So whenever you are doing a hypothesis test, always check. Don't, okay, your statistical p values and other values will tell that okay, this null hypothesis stands rejected or accepted, but you have to also see that whether that concept stands true in the population or not. Suppose you have rejected a null hypothesis, but the actual case is something different in the population, then you are doing type 1 error. Please avoid it. But seriously avoid doing type 2 error. Means something that does not stands true in the population, that is false in the population, and you are actually accepting that. Then, or failing to reject that null hypothesis, then that will be the case of type 2 error, and this could be seriously avoided. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
What about others? Only one or two responses.
Yes, sir.
So always make a confusion matrix of your test because you will be having two concepts. One is your null hypothesis, one is your alternate hypothesis. Just make a confusion matrix of true positive, false negative, and true negative, and see whether after doing the hypothesis test, isn't this the case that you are landing either in false positive zone or false negative zone? Try to correct that also, but if you are falling in false negative zone, that is doing type 2 error, then you should be seriously concerned of checking your data set, checking your concepts. That where we have the concept validity and other things. You have to check that whether, because these may even happen due to sampling and non-sampling errors also, where it might be case that you have chosen a wrong sample. That's why you are landing up in type 1 or type 2 error, or your respondents have given some biased responses. This could also result in type 1 or type 2 error. Means your method of data collection could be wrong, or your respondents could be biased, or whatever the statements or the questions you have made while doing a survey, they either they are wrong or people or your respondent are not able to comprehend them properly. That's why we first do pilot testing and check for internal validity, reliability, all these things to avoid only this type 1 and type 2 error. Now moving on to, once we are now aware of how to formulate a null hypothesis. What is the basis of rejection? Because we say if p is less than 0.05 reject null, but from where this concept is coming? This concept is coming from your normal distribution, where you are having a confidence interval of 95% and a significance level of 5%. So if you are saying that p is less than 0.5, means this 5% means whatever you are checking, that is not happening by the probability of occurrence. This p value is nothing but the probability of occurrence by chance. Means this probability of occurrence by chance is not happening. Okay, so you will reject the null hypothesis because whatever you have tested, that is not falling into 5% zone. If it is greater than 0.5, then equal to or more than 0.5, then it is falling into the zone of 5%. That is, the probability of occurrence is happening by chance. Okay, then you have to accept the null hypothesis. Now, the first hypothesis that we test is one sample t-test. What happens, one sample t-test is normally used to see whether the sample that we have drawn, they are the true representatives of the population or not. And what we do actually, hypothesis test is mostly about comparison of means. So we have two means in this case, a population mean, that is the hypothesized mean, and a sample mean, that is the calculated mean that you have calculated while performing test. And you see that whether the mean from your sample deviates from the mean from your population or not. If this is the case, then you will perform one sample t-test. Like you have undertaken some literature review, and most of the studies, they are suggesting something. Now you will test that when I draw my sample from my population, because that study might be have been done in some other population, some other context you are doing in your own population or context, then you will check that whatever you have taken, the sample is you have taken in your case, their statistic differs from that previous study statistic or not. For that, you will do one sample t-test. So this test is also known as single sample t-test, and the test variable that is used is known as the test variable. And in this one sample t-test, this test variable is compared against the test value. Normally, this test value is the hypothesized population mean, and you have a test variable that you check that whether it is equal to that or less than that or more than that, and that's why it's known as a two-tailed test. One sample t-test is called a two-tailed test because you see that against the test value, whether it's increasing than the test value or it is decreasing as compared to the test value. That's why it is known as two-tailed test. Two-tailed test means bidirectional. Means you have a test value, or you can say a median value, and you see that your calculated value is on which side of this test value, increasing than that test value or decreasing than that test value. So normally, if I talk of a two-tailed test, it will be like this. Your test value and this direction, positive, or in this, sorry, or you can say increasing, or this side decreasing. Where it is going, your value is where it is going. That's why it is known as two-tailed test. So the your data should meet the following requirements: that your test variable should be taken on a continuous scale. Already I have told that if you have to perform a parametric test, I could see many messages where people are saying that they are unable to join. Are they able to join now? Let me see. Just a minute. A few people have messaged that they are unable to join. See, sometimes it takes depending on your speed that whether uh, how much the waiting time that depends. That's why I always say that please start joining 10 minutes before the start of the event. Fine. So in the previous sessions only, I have said that if you have to perform a parametric test, so one sample t-test is a kind of parametric test, then you have to, first thing that you have to see that whether your data that you have collected or your dependent variable or your test variable, it should be on a continuous scale. That is either interval or ratio. If it is on non-metric or categorical scale, then you cannot perform a parametric test. And through decision tree also I have shown. Then scores on the test variable are independent. Means one of the score is not affecting the other score. Means every individual observation should be there. Then data should be drawn from random sample, or the sample should be drawn randomly from the population, either through simple random sampling or cluster or whatever sampling method, but it should be probability sampling or randomly it should be taken. There should be normal distribution, your data should be normally distributed. There should be homogeneity in the variances and no outliers, because outliers will affect the mean value. So there shouldn't be any outliers. This is your data requirement for doing one sample t-test. Now let's see what is the hypothesis that we formulate in the null hypothesis. So, sorry, that we formulate in the one sample t-test. So the null and the alternate hypothesis in one sample t-test could be expressed as mu is equal to x. Sorry, this is not on x. This is x bar actually. This should be x bar. Fine. So where your x bar means both the means. Okay. So your sample mean, where x bar is your sample mean and mu is your population. So you are saying, if you are saying that mu is equal to x, in fact, you are saying that there exists no significant difference between the population mean and the sample mean. And alternate hypothesis is expressed as mu is not equal to x bar, which means that you are saying that there exists a significant difference between the population mean and the sample. Or you can express it that the sample mean is equal to the proposed population mean. That is your null hypothesis. And alternatives that the sample mean is not equal to the proposed population mean, which means that there exists some significant difference. In case of alternate hypothesis, in case of null hypothesis, you are saying there exists no significant difference between both the means. Now let's take a case. Now, according to the Central for Drug Control, they have conducted some survey and they have said that the mean height of the adult aged 20 and older is about 66.5 inches. When it comes to individual groups, then it comes out to be 69.3 inches for males and 63.8 inches for females. However, in this case, we are not taking into account the groups of male and female. So overall, we will take into account the population where they have conducted, and they have said that on the population, if the population consists of adults is 20 and older, their average height or the mean height would come to be 66.5 inches. Now we have taken the height of people in our from our population or from our sample, and let's test if the mean height of our sample data is significantly different from this 66.5 inches, and this could be done using one sample t-test. So already I've told that one sample t-test is used to test that if there is some existing statistic from a population, if you are calculating the same thing on our sample, we test that whether it is significantly different from what is suggested by the study from the population or not. So here again we have this population mean 66.5 inches. Now we have taken let's say height from individuals in our sample, and we want to check that whether the mean height from our sample differs from the 66.5 inches or not. So here we'll apply one sample t-test. And the null hypothesis will be x bar height is equal to mu height is equal to 66.5, and alternate hypothesis will be x bar height is equal to mu height is equal to 66.5. So mu height, that is the population mean height, that is 66.5. In one case, that is in alternate hypothesis, we are saying that there exists no significant difference between both the means. Means both means are equal. The mean height of the sample is equal to 66.5. Whereas in alternate hypothesis, we are saying that the mean height of the sample is not equal to 66.5, means there exists some significant difference. So 66.5 is the CDC's Central of Drug Control, Center of Disease Control's estimate height of average height of adults, and our X bar height is the mean height of that we have calculated from the sample. Let's test this. So we have a data, I have shared with you the data. Sample data that's set.sav. Can you please open it, everybody? Once you are with the data, please let me know. So this is our height. Have you opened this? Once it is open, please let me know.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So this we have to apply this one sample t-test on this. So simply go to analyze, compare means, because this is a kind of mean comparison, and click on one sample t-test. So our test variable that we want to test is the height. Now you can see if it is marked as a scale means it is a categorical, it's a metric or continuous variable. So this is our test variable. What should be our test value? Remember, test value is the value against which we are comparing our value. So what should be our test value?
Sir, 65.5.
66.5, I think. It's 66.5, the mean height from the population. So we put it 66.5. Options, nothing is there. In SPSS, you might be finding this option bootstrap. So I'll be coming to Bootstrap in some advanced analytics during this session only. As of now, you know if your data is not normally distributed by any method, because see, I have told you that if your data is not normally distributed, try to increase the sample size, try to make your scale interval, try to assign weight to your scale, or you can take logarithmic value of your data. If any of them is not working, then the newer versions of SPSS, they have an option known as Bootstrap. What happens when you perform a bootstrap on your data set or on your model? It creates robust confidence intervals. So what exactly it does, let me tell you. See, this is our confidence interval. So for data to be normally distributed, it should fall into our confidence interval minus 2 sigma, mu minus 2 sigma to mu plus 2 sigma. Suppose if it's not falling, so if you are increasing the sample size, bringing in more samples under this curve, chances are that data will become normally distributed. If nothing is working, then you bootstrap the model, it will actually increase the range of the confidence interval, create more robust confidence interval. So the moment your confidence interval is elongated, what will happen? That data will fall into this curve and your data will become normal. But I'll tell about this bootstrapping at later stage. As of now, our data is normally distributed, so nothing to worry. Or if you want, we can test that whether it's normally distributed or not. So you can go to this explore. Now I'm repeating the method again. Height, okay. And statistics, nothing. Go to plots, normality plot with test. Continue. Okay. So you can see that our significance value is, this is somewhat near to 0.5. This is somewhat 0.07, 0.0, more than 0.05. So somewhere our data is normally distributed. Or if you see it through this normal QQ plot, most of the data you can see they are just very close to this line. So this vertical, this diagonal line. So you can say that the data is normally distributed. Now compare means one sample t-test, take the height, test value 66.5. Okay. And here we have got our one sample t-test value. You can see the degree of freedom is 407, which is in one sample t-test. Degree of freedom is equal to n minus 1. So it will be, we had 408 cases, degree of freedom is 407. T value is 5.810 and significance value you see, it's 0.000, less than 0.05. Null hypothesis is rejected. So you can see that if null hypothesis is rejected, our means, it means that our mean value from the sample is different from the population mean. You just see our hypothesis. If null hypothesis is rejected, this means this one is accepted. And this one is accepted, that means that the mean height from the sample is not equal to mean height from the population, means there exists a significant difference. And how much that difference is, can anybody tell from the table? How much that difference is?
Sir, it's 1.53176.
And what is our mean height from the sample?
Sir, I forgot the number. It was 66.5.
No, that's our population mean. What is our sample mean? Because this mean difference is coming from two means, na? You have
Yes,
another mean also. What is that mean? What is the value of that mean?
68.0318.
68.0318. Actually, it's 68.0138.
Yes, sir.
0318.
Yeah, so our mean value comes out to be 68.0318, and we are saying that on the basis of normally what we say, p is less than 0.000. Sorry, p is less than 0.05, null hypothesis rejected. This is not the way of reporting a test. So the way of reporting a t-test is you will write like this to compare that whether the mean height of the sample was, because see difference could be there, but you have to also see whether that difference is significant or not. So if it is less than 0.05, then only it's significant. If it is not, then the difference won't be, there could be the difference, but it won't be significant. So we always use the word significant, because if it's not of significance, then it's of no use. To compare that whether the mean height of the sample was significantly different from the mean height of the population, we conducted a one sample t-test. And you will put the table and you will write from the table it is, or it could be inferred that p at the degree of freedom 407 is equal to 5.81. P is less than 0.05, because this means that if you will take the value of t at the degree of freedom 407, and if the t value comes out to be this, then you will see that what is the p value. If you see the manual t, the table of t, then you will find all these things. So you have to mention this. At this, if t degree of freedom 407 comes out to be 5.81, then p value will be less than 0.05. So null hypothesis is rejected. Hence, we can say that the sample mean is significantly different from the population mean, and that difference equals to 1.531, 1.531, and is significant at 5% level of significance. This is the overall reporting of this test. Is that clear? Should I move ahead?
Yes, sir.
Now, this homogeneity of variance I have already told. We need to check this when we go for independent t-test. Now, one thing, yeah, I forgot to mention. Normally, nobody talks about this. That is the calculating the effect size. That whatever the results you are getting in your sample, whether the given the size of your sample or size of your observations, whether it is having a effect on your this population or not. Sometimes it may be that there is a significant difference, but given the size of your sample or given the size of your population, it is not affecting the population to much level. Means it is significant, everything is there, but it does not have a significant, or you can say it does not have a proper effect on your population. Let's say I'm saying that I have measured the IQ level of two students, means or from my sample, there is I have taken IQ level from my sample, and standard IQ level says that there should be, for a better IQ level, a person should have this much score. So our score was greater than the average score from the population. But given the sample size, let's say we calculated it on only 10 students. Okay. So we will see that whether that is having a significant representation or not. So this we can do through calculating the effect size. And the formula for the effect size is, so normally we do not calculate the effect size, that's the problem. So however, we should always calculate the effect size also. So if I talk of the formula of effect size, it is denoted by R. Don't confuse with Pearson correlation. R is equal to underscore T square upon T square plus degree of freedom. So our T was 5.81, the T value from the table, 5.81 square upon again 5.81 square plus degree of freedom was 407 and under root of this. So this will come out to be, let me calculate. So this is something which people avoid, or I have seen they do not talk about, but this is a very important thing. Whatever the result you are getting, whether it is having a proper effect on your population or not. For that, we should, after every test, we should calculate the effect size, whether it's correlation, regression, or what. So 5.81 square. So this will come out to be 33.76 upon 33.76 plus 407 under root is equal to plus 407 to under root of 33.76 upon 440.7 6 is equal to, let's see how much it comes out to be, 3.76 divided by 440.76.
It's 0.276.
Have you calculated it?
It is 0.276.
After calculating the under root,
Yes. Yes,
0.276,
sir.
that will translate to 27.6% of effect. So you can see that in your result, you can just say that uh, after that you can just report and is significant at 5 level per 5% level of significance and have a medium sized effect of 27.6%. If you mention this, it would be useful because it will tell that whatever the difference you are getting, whether whether that difference is creating some effect on your population or not. Because if it is not creating any effect on the population, it is not having a significant representation in the population, then that value is of no use. Are you getting my point? Yes, audience.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. It is clear.
Okay. Okay. So whatever test you apply, whether it's a independent t-test or pair t-test or ANOVA or regression or correlation, even if you are getting a regression coefficient, you have to see that whatever the value you are getting, whether it is means given the size of your population, whether it is having a effect on your population or not. That I have given you the example of IQ level. Though, let's say I have taken only 10 people and have tested their IQ and it says that they are having great IQs. But can I generalize this result? I cannot generalize this result on the overall population because my sample size is so small to calculate the effect size on the overall population. So if you have to generalize the result on your overall population, you have to calculate the effect size. So here we can see that if we generalize our result, our mean age was 68 point something. And if I say from my sample that in given my population, the population that I have taken, everybody is of a mean height of 68 point something, which in our result came. And that effect due to the size of our sample comes out to be 27.6%, which is somewhat medium effect, right? So effect size should also be reported. Now coming to independent sample t-test. So if you have to compare two means, where two means comes from different groups of your population. So like in our first case, we have taken the mean age of people is 20 years. We have also taken the mean age of mean height of the people is 20 years and above when they are divided into females and males. We have also taken. So situation is such that if we have from the sample we have two groups and those two groups are mutually exclusive of each other. Their characteristics do not match with each other, means they are of different characteristic, then we will go for independent sample t-test. So if I go through this definition, so this independent sample t-test compares the means of two independent groups in order to determine whether there is a statistical evidence that the associated population means are significantly different or not, where your sample mean is coming from two groups. and these two groups are mutually exclusive of each other. So like male, female, smoker, non-smoker, okay, athlete, non-athlete, means where correct your population is divided into two groups and their characteristic do not match with each other. So this test is also known as independent t-test or independent measure t-test, independent two sample t-test, student t-test, lot of name are there. It has many names in different context. So the variable used in this test is known as a dependent variable. You have one dependent variable, which is also known as the test variable. Then you have the independent variable, which is since divided into two groups, so it is also known as the grouping variable. So these are the common uses of independent sample t-test. So first one is to check the statistical difference between the mean of two groups. Then statistical difference between the mean of two interventions. Suppose if you are conducting some experiment, and in the experiment, what happened that you create a control group and you create a experimental group. To the control group, you give the normal treatment or intervention. To the experimental group, you give some extra treatment or intervention, and you want to calculate that how these two groups are different. Like you have taken two patients suffering from, let's say, fever. To one, you are giving a nothing, a normal treatment, okay, like some homeopathic medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. To other, you are giving some crocin or uh, uh, and want to check the effect of crocin on the treatment of fever. So this will be the second intervention, and in both the cases, you want to see that how these two interventions are having different effect or the same effect. So like in such situations, so mostly we also use in experimental studies. Then statistical difference between the means of two changes scores. So in all these cases, we take independent sample t-test. In this independent sample t-test, if your group becomes more than two, then that becomes the case of one-way ANOVA. So you can say that one-way ANOVA is nothing but the extension of independent sample t-test. Till your two groups which are different from each other, mutually exclusive from each other, they are categorized into two groups only. It will be a case of independent sample t-test. The moment this differs from two to more groups, means three or more groups, it will become the case of one-way ANOVA. So the data requirement for conducting this test is that your dependent variable should be continuous. Independent variable should be categorical, because you have divided two groups. Your independent variable is into two groups, means only categories. Okay. So your independent variable is categorical. Your dependent variable is continuous, interval taken on an interval or ratio scale. And then you have cases that have values on both the dependent and independent. So whatever the observation you are taking, whatever the phenomena you are testing, it should have values on both dependent and independent variable. And then there should be independence of observation. That is the necessary requirement of almost all kind of t-test. Means one observation should not affect the another one. Otherwise, you will get an inaccurate p-value. Data should be drawn from randomly from the population. Data should be normally distributed. Homogeneity of variances should be there, and no outliers. However, if you want to perform independent sample t-test and you don't get the homogeneity of variance, then also we have the option to conduct this test. I'll just let you know in the process how. So the hypothesis, again, we will formulate a null and alternate hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis is that, sorry, null hypothesis is that mu1 is equal to mu2. Means the population of the two means, the two population means are equal. Means there exists no significant difference between the population mean of group 1 and group 2. And alternate hypothesis is that the two population means are not equal, or mu1 is not equal to mu2, which translates to that the mean of the population of group 1 is having some significant difference from the mean of the population of group 2. If you write like, you can write like this also, that mu1 minus mu2 is equal to 0. That is the difference between the two population means is equal to 0. Or alternate, you can write that mu1 minus mu2 is not equal to 0. That the difference between the two population means is not 0. So either ways you can write. Simply just if you formulate a linear equation, it will be if mu1 is equal to mu2, then mu1 minus mu2 is equal to 0. mu1 is not equal to mu2, then mu1 minus mu2 will not be equal to 0. Where mu1 and mu2 are the population means for group 1 and group 2 respectively. Then see, since we have two different groups, these two different groups are having different characteristics. So we will see that there is the homogeneity in variances or not, or homoscedasticity also say. This is known as, this could be tested by Levin's test for equality of variance. And its hypothesis will be sigma 1 square minus sigma 2 square is equal to 0, or sigma 1 square is equal to sigma 2 square, where sigma square is the standard deviation. So the population variances of group 1 and group 2 are equal. That is the first assumption, null hypothesis. That population variance of group 1 and group 2 are equal. And second hypothesis is that population variance of group 1 and group 2 are not equal. So in first case, you are saying that the equal variances are assumed, means there is homoscedasticity or homogeneity. In the second case, alternate hypothesis, you are saying that there is no homoscedasticity, means the population variances of group 1 and group 2 are not equal. And if they are not equal, then there is no homogeneity there or homoscedasticity. Till this point, am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's test this. So this is the data setup, no missing values, no outliers. Now this is our case problem statement. So if you see our sample data set, we have a group of students who have reported their typical time to run 1 mile distance. And these students have been divided into two groups, athletes and non-athletes. So a characteristic of athlete is different from a non-athlete. Now, suppose we want to know if the average time to run a mile is different for athletes versus non-athletes, means two means are different or not. Means the time taken to run a mile differs between the athlete and non-athlete, or they remain the same. So this involves testing whether the sample mean for mile time among athlete and non-athlete in the sample are statistically different or not. So this could be tested through independent t-test, because now we have two groups of students. One group is of athletes, another group is of non-athletes. They were asked to run 1 mile distance, and we calculated the average time taken to run 1 mile distance. Now we want to see that whether the time taken to run 1 mile distance remains the same in both the groups or it is different. So here the hypothesis for in this case will be, the null hypothesis is mu non-athlete minus mu athlete is equal to 0, means the difference of the means is equal to 0, which means there is no significant difference between the athletes and non-athletes to run a mile. Alternate hypothesis is mu athlete minus mu non-athlete minus mu athlete is not equal to 0, means there exists some significant difference between the time taken by the athletes and non-athletes to run 1 mile. So mu athlete and mu non-athlete are the population means for athletes and non-athletes respectively. Now let's test this. So this is our data set. You can see the groups of athlete 0 and 1. 0 is non-athlete, 1 is athlete, and time to run a mile minute duration. how much time they took to run a mile. These two things we are going to check. But before that, we have also formed one hypothesis for equality of variances. If you could see here, this was our that sigma 1 square minus sigma 2 square is equal to 0. The null hypothesis was that the equal variances are there in the group 1 and group 2. Means group 1 and group 2 are having equal variances, means there is homogeneity of variance, and null alternate was that the variance among group 1 and group 2 are not equal, means they are different. If the variances are different, means there is no homogeneity. And for independent sample t-test, there needs to be homogeneity among the groups. So let's check the first hypothesis first. So go to analyze, then compare means. First select one way ANOVA. And here we will see the mile, minute duration, time taken to run 1 mile, and then the groups, the factor, athlete or non-athlete, the group we have taken. Then go to options and here select the homogeneity of variances. Continue. Okay. So here what is our value coming to be? Can anybody tell me what is your p value in this case? It's 0.000, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So what will happen? Whether the null hypothesis will be accepted or rejected?
Null hypothesis is rejected.
Means null hypothesis rejected means population variance of group 1 group 2 are equal. This hypothesis is rejected. Now the population, we will accept the alternate that the population variance of group 1 and group 2 are not equal. Means there is no homogeneity of variance, right? But can't we apply the independent t-test? We will apply, but statistic will differ. Let's check. So remember, there is no homogeneity of variance in our case. We have checked through this. Now we are going to apply independent t-test. So independent sample t-test, we will bring this mile minute duration to test variable because this is what we want to test. Then athletes are our groups. So we have two groups, 0 as non-athlete, 1 as athlete. Continue. Okay. Now we have p value, degree of freedom, t value, everything in two cases, equal variances assumed and equal variances not assumed. Whenever you will perform independent t-test, it will give you these two results, two different results. Which one we should follow? In this case, which one we should take? This statistic, equal variances assumed or equal variances not assumed? Because we are getting the degree of freedom, we are getting the t value, we are getting the significance value in all the cases. So what we should follow?
Sir, equal variance not assumed.
Yes, because when we tested our this hypothesis, it says that the equal variances are not there in group 1 and group 2. Our null hypothesis was rejected. So we will take equal variances not assumed. Because most of the time when we do independent sample t-test and we get these two results, most of the time people get confused that which one to take, equal variances assumed or equal variances not assumed. So for that, first perform the Levene test of equality of variance. If Leibniz test of equality of variance comes out to be significant, then take equal variance as assumed. If does not turns out to be significant, means the p-value is less than 0.05, then go for equal variances not assumed, because your alternate hypothesis is accepted and null is rejected. And alternate is always about equal variances not assumed. Now, if we have to report this, so we will report an independent sample t-test was conducted to check whether the time taken to run 1 mile distance by the athletes or by the students, you can elaborate more, by the students divided into two groups, athletes and non-athletes is same or is different. Then put your table, this ANOVA table, and you can write, put both the table, this one. First, you will put this one. So you can continue first at the first step, Levin's test of equality of variances was conducted. Then put this table, this Levin's test of variances table. From this table, we can see that p is less than 0.05. So null hypothesis rejected, indicating that there is no equal variances between the two groups. After that, put this ANOVA table, independent sample t-test table, and write from this table T degree of freedom, because now you have to take the equal variances not assumed case. T degree of freedom comes out to degree of freedom is 315. T 315 is equal to 15.047. At this value, P is less than 0.05. So null hypothesis is rejected, which states that, or which indicates that, there exists a significant difference between the athletes and non-athletes who run 1 mile distance. The total time taken by the athletes was, can anybody tell me from the table? Take this mean value. This mean value, okay, was 9.06. No, by athletes was, it was 6 minutes 51 seconds. 1 seconds, and by non-athletes was 9 minutes 06 seconds. So non-athletes two minutes 14 seconds more than the athletes who run 1 mile distance. Or you can write other way, that athletes took 2.14 seconds, 2 minutes 14 seconds less than the non-athletes to run 1 mile distance. Now calculate the effect size. The results have a, let's calculate the effect size. If you could recall the formula, R is equal to, anybody can recall that formula?
R is equal to square root T square upon T square minus degree of freedom.
T square upon T
square minus degree of freedom.
Plus degree of freedom, sir.
Plus degree of freedom.
So what is our T value from the result? If you see this T value, 15.047, and degree of freedom is 315. So it's 15 point, let's round it off, 0.05 square upon 15.05 square plus degree of freedom was 315. Can anybody solve it for me? So it comes out to be, calculate. To under root 226.50.
Sir, it's 0.626.
Okay, plus 350.
62.
It comes out to be
62.6.
Six, Miss point in decimals, please tell.
626. 0.626.
0.626. So you can see that it's having a very good representation in the population. So you can see, you can write here, the results have a good size of how much? Which is 2.6%. This is your overall result from this test. Independence of t-test means given your sample size, whatever the results you are getting, that athlete took, non-athlete took 2.14, 2 minutes 14 seconds more than the athletes, that has overall effect size of 62.6% given your sample size. Okay. So this is the overall interpretation of independent t-test. Now paired sample t-test. So this paired sample t-test compare two means that are from the same individual. So previously in independent sample t-test, we were calculating the mean that was coming from two different individuals or two different groups. Here from the same group or from the same individual, your means are coming, and if you have to compare, then you will use paired sample t-test. So in situations like pre and post, or in situations like to the same individual, you are giving two different treatments at two different time period, and you are using, okay, intervention administered between two different times. Let's say if I want to know the effect of this webinar on your understanding of statistics at the first day of the start of the webinar and at the end of the webinar or the workshop, then that will be, because you will remain the same, the individual will remain the same, only what is different, that is the two different time points. So in that case, we can perform the paired sample t-test. This is also known as the dependent t-test. So measurement taken under two different conditions is, one is a controlled condition and experimental condition. There also you can do measurements taken from two halves or sides of a subject or experimental unit. That is, for example, measuring hair loss in a subject's left and right ears. Means all these things, if there is a case, individual remain the same and only situations differs, then in that case you can perform a paired sample t-test. So the common uses is that it is used to calculate the statistical difference between two time points. It is also used to calculate the statistical difference between two conditions on the same individual. This you have to keep in mind. Then the statistical difference between two measurement and the statistical difference between a matched pair. So data requirement is that you have independent variable, that is continuous, interval or ratio. Then you have related sample or groups, means dependent observations. In independent sample, we had unrelated observations. Here we have dependent observations. Data is, or sample has been drawn randomly from the population. Normal distribution is there. No outliers is there. These are the basic assumptions that are required for the data. Again, here the hypothesis will be same as the independent t-test hypothesis. Only difference is in independent t-test hypothesis, you take two hypotheses. One is for the means and another one is for equality of variances. So here there is no equality of variances required because you have the same individual, okay, in under different situations. So no need of Levin's test of equality of variances. No need of checking the homogeneity. So the hypothesis will remain the same, like mu1 is equal to mu2, that paired population means are equal, and mu1 is not equal to mu2, that is the paired population means are not equal. Means under two different situations, means mu1 will be the population, the mean under the first situation, and mu2 will be the mean under the second situation. So in both the situations, the means are equal, means no significant difference exists. That is your null hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis is that mu1 is not equal to mu2, means there exists a significant difference. The paired population means are not equal. Or you can write it like mu1 minus mu2 is equal to 0 and mu1 minus mu2 is not equal to 0. Means the difference between them, between the population mean is equal to 0 or not equal to 0. So where mu1 is the population mean of variable 1 or situation 1 and mu2 is the population mean of variable 2 or situation. So the data should contain two continuous numeric variables, all those we have seen. Now the problem statement. Let's take the case from the same sample data set. That the sample data set has placement test scores out of 100 points for 4 subjects: English, reading, math and writing. Now we are interested in the English and math sections and we want to determine whether English or math had higher test scores on average or not. Now here you can see the student is the same. We want to test his score in English subject and math subject. Means two different situations. Once he has been given in English class and the math class, how is this, whether his scores in English and math differs or remains the same. So you can see the individual is the same, only two different situations. So paired sample t-test will be used. Let's apply. So we have English reading, math, writing. So we want English scores and maths scores. So go to analyze, descriptive statistics, sorry, compare means paired sample t-test. And make in the pair, take the first variable was English, second variable was math. We have only one pair, so we'll go for independent t-test. Sorry, paired sample t-test. Click on OK. Now here we have got the value. You can see that P is less than 0.05, null hypothesis rejected, and we can say that there exists a significant difference between the score of the student, of a particular student in English and math. Now this we can write like this. To test that whether.
So there is a question.
Yes.
Sir, in this we have taken two different groups, like English and math. But you were mentioning that in paired group we take only one group and we do some experimentation and then we see the result.
Now see, the same student. Now you have taken one student and you have exposed that student to two exams. One is English exam and math exam.
Okay, sir.
Right?
Okay.
The student remain the same. Now his score under two different situations. When he has taken the English exam and when he has taken the math exam. You
Sir,
want to
one
see
more thing, the alternative hypothesis based on your literature review.
Sir, actually, sir, null hypothesis we make that is based on the literature review. Your hypothesis will come from, I will take up the questions after the session. I'll just wind up and I'll take up the questions. Okay.
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Just let me complete after this t-test. I'll be just taking up the questions. So now we have got this. P is less than 0.000. Sorry, P is less than 0.05. Null hypothesis rejected. And null hypothesis, if rejected, then it says that mu1 is not equal to mu2. Means the paired population means are not equal. That is, the student score in math and English won't be equal. So to test that whether an individual students score in the text and English exam and a maths exam differs significantly are not be performed a paired sample T test. Can you put the table, and from the table, from the results, it is clear that all from the results we can infer that T at the degree of freedom 397 is equal to 36.313. At this level, P will be less than 0.05. Hence, null hypothesis is rejected, which indicates that the students' scores in both the exams differ significantly, and this difference comes to be 17.29. Take this table is score in English was found to be 82.74, and in math it was found to be 65.44. The results obtained as an effect size of. So can you please calculate the effect size? Anybody? See, in paired t-test, we don't calculate the effect size with the previous formula. That is only for the independent t-test and paired t-test. Sorry, independent t-test and one sample t-test. For paired t-test, we have something called coherence D. Okay, for calculating the effect size. So that formula says D is equal to X bar English minus X bar math, means whatever the two groups you have taken. upon x bar, the lower one, x bar math. The second variable in the group. So Cohen's D is equal to x mean of the first variable minus mean of the second variable upon mean of the second variable. This is the Cohen's D. So what is the mean of the first variable? If you see the table, $82.74 and x bar 2 is 65.44. So it will be 82.74 minus 65.44 upon 65.44 is equal to
0.26.
65.44. It will be 0.26, means 26%. So you will report here. So always remember, when you go for this calculating the effect size for paired t-test, use Cohen's d formula. It's known as Cohen's, means this one, Cohen's d. So the result obtained has an effect size of 26%. It is, you can fairly moderate, you can say, or fairly moderate. Moderate effect. So this is your overall result from this statistic. So today we are done with the mean comparisons of paired t-test, independent t-test, and one sample t-test, hypothesis formulation, and other things. Now tomorrow we'll be covering all kinds of